So the climb up to the pedestal was quite a lot of stairs you had to go up. Obviously not as many stairs as you would have to go up if you were going to the crown, but to the top of the pedestal was still quite a few stairs, and there was the option of taking the elevator, but I decided not to, of course. And oh, something else I didn't mention about the design of the Statue of Liberty. So Bartholdi was the artist that did there was really all of the copper on the outside, but this statue was many, many, many stories tall. Like, it was taller than many buildings that were being built at the time, and they really needed some good solid structure there, more than an artist was really capable of performing adequate calculations and being able to ensure that the statue would be strong enough that it wouldn't blow over. So he got he hired another person from France who was an engineer, a civil engineer, and he designed the inner structure, like the lattice of steel that makes up the center of the pedestal that holds all of the copper in place. And the engineer that he hired was a man by the name of Eiffel, and of course you recognize his name because he was the person that designed the Eiffel Tower, and his whole career was all about showing the world about how steel and iron were the big building materials of the future, and like the Eiffel Tower in particular was showing that you can make so much out of steel, and steel was really what was going to make the age of the skyscraper. So he came around right at the right time when steel and iron were really being developed a lot. So that was his fame. He designed the inner structure of the Statue of Liberty years before the Eiffel Tower came along at the World's Fair in France. So after climbing the stairs, there were some yellow boxes on the floor, and Jeff, the tour guide, told us that if we stood on those boxes and looked up, we'd be able to see up in the structure. So that was pretty cool because you got to see all that structure that I was just talking about on the inside, and you could see the inside of all of the copper panels that were making up the skin of the statue. So that was really neat. And after doing that, then we went outside on the little walkway that goes around on the pedestal, and really great view. It really was quite high up. And it really gave a great view of the New York skyline again, which I got lots of video and pictures of the skyline. Also from that view, you could look right up and you could see the statue was only like the bottom, like the feet of Lady Liberty were only maybe 10 meters away from where you were, and you could really see along the side or along the sides of her body all the way up to her head, and that was pretty neat. So I got more footage of that from all different angles there. Then I walked from that top. I'd seen everything from up there, so from there you can go down a few steps, and then you're at another level, which is quite a bit lower, but you can still see a good view of the statue from below, like a better view than you could get just from the grass where the non-pedestal people were standing. Yeah, so I just kept going down. There's a few levels. At the bottom level there, you're standing on just below where the pedestal begins, and there's this sort of star-shaped structure that you're standing on, and that's the pedestal was actually built inside of an existing fort that was built there before the Statue of Liberty or anything was there on that island. That island was used as a fort for protecting the New York harbor, and so they had this fort, this little base that was there, and they filled that in with concrete, and they built the statue on top of it, which gave the statue even more height. So that was pretty neat to see that as well. So after that, I had pretty much seen everything on the island, and I got back on the ferry, and I was feeling pretty tired at that point, or at least my feet were getting sore from all the walking. It was quite a bit of walking around just on the site. It's quite a big island, and lots to do and see around there. So In addition to climbing, you did quite a bit of walking. So I got back on the ferry, and by that point it was almost, I think, 1 in the afternoon or something. It was quite late, and by this point I was getting pretty hungry because I hadn't eaten breakfast, and lunch had gone by when I was up in the Pedestal. So I got on the ferry boat across to Ellis Island. I got a sausage from the vendor that was on there. It wasn't expensive, and it filled up my stomach at least temporarily. Anyway, so after the ferry ride, I got to Ellis Island. What Ellis Island is it was an immigration office where everyone that was immigrating to the United States from all over the world, that were coming into this end of the United States, either going to New York City or Philadelphia or any of those areas around there. They came through Ellis Island, and it was the biggest port of immigration in the United States. And they said, the sign said that approximately 12 million people were immigrated through that office there. So quite a busy place at one point. At this point, again, it was like 1 in the afternoon, and I had only envisioned, since I was going to the stand in line for the Liberties so early, I was thinking that this would just be a small little event, and then I'd be able to come back and continue on with all the other things I had planned for the day, because the trip to Liberty Island was planned for Wednesday, and I hadn't anticipated squeezing that into today's plans. So I didn't want to spend too much time on there, so I figured on Ellis Island and Liberty Island are both national parks of the United States. So they have exactly the same feature at Ellis Island as they had on Liberty Island, which was you could get a free guided tour by one of the park rangers. And so I really enjoyed the first one, so I went and did the same thing. And again, it was really useful. I figured that if I went on this, said it was a 45-minute tour, and I figured if I did something like that, it would show me pretty much everything that I wanted to see, and it would go by nice and quickly, and then I'd be able to get back onto the ferry boat, having seen a really good summary of everything that was there from the tour guide. So that's what I did, and again, it was pretty good. The tour guide told lots of really good stories about how everyone that came in had lots of different evaluations that they had to pass before getting in. First there was lots of medical things because they didn't want people bringing in highly contagious diseases in. So they checked their eyes for glaucoma, and they had doctors there that checked for respiratory problems. He said that something that they did was that after they came in, they had to go up some stairs, and they had a security guard that stood there, and it looked at all the immigrants, and he could see if they were out of breath after climbing the stairs. Then that was one of the tests to see whether they had respiratory problems. So they had a system there that the guards knew that the immigrants, of course, didn't know about, which was that when they saw someone that was showing a certain sign that wasn't good for immigration, then they would put a sign on them. They'd write on their backs with a piece of chalk. So the person climbing up the stairs that was getting out of breath, they had a mark on them that showed that they had respiratory problems. There was other evaluations that they had, like mental evaluations. They had to, they did like language tests to make sure that they could speak their own language, and they had little puzzles that they had to put together, like wooden blocks that had to fit in different spots, and they had a certain amount of time to do it. And everyone so everyone started out as being fine and okay, and then as soon as they found something wrong with them, then they had to go to a separate area. And these are families usually that are coming through Ellis Island, so the families are getting split apart all the time before the end, when they usually all get out together. He talked about how if there was something in question, that the person would go to a hearing, and they would have to give their story about why whatever wasn't right was happening, and they give their story of explaining themselves for why they ended up in there in the first place, and they could bring family members with them to that, and the family members would give testimony, and then they would either either decide to deport the person, or they decide to detain them for longer until they got whatever it was cleared up, or they would let them go into the country. And they said that although Ellis Island had a reputation of being a really strict and harsh immigration office, that it was only about 2% of people that didn't get accepted into the United States. But still, having traveled all the way across the ocean to this little office, it would be really disappointing not being able to, having to be deported and going all the way back home. Another interesting thing he told us was that if you were coming across in the boat and you had a ticket and you're in first class or second class, then they didn't even send you to Ellis Island. You had free admission to the United States. They figured that if you had enough money to buy one of those tickets, that you were probably just fine and dandy. You didn't have any medical problems or any educational problems or anything like that. So they felt that you were safe enough, so they didn't need to screen those people at all. But if you were on a lower class system, your ticket was a lot less expensive, and they figured that you were probably poor and that you probably had things wrong with you that they wanted to check out. So they'd send you to Ellis Island to go through all of the rigorous screenings. And he also talked about how if you ended up there at the end of the day or something when they were closing, then they'd keep you overnight, and they had these dormitories, which they had a reconstruction of what the dormitories looked like, and there's all these little bunk beds that were all stacked up, really thin little shelving layers where the people slept at Ellis Island. And they also said that they separated the men from the women during the night. They couldn't even see each other. Like they could see each other through like a chain link fence or something. But on one side of the building they had all the women, and on the other side of the building they had all the men. They could only see each other through that little fence that they had there. But he said that sometimes people ended up staying there for whatever reason for like up to 5 years, and they said that like that was particularly like during the World Wars. They didn't really want to be bringing in people from the enemy countries to immigrate into the country during the World War. So they got kept at Ellis Island for many years at the time. So at that point, I had pretty much traveled around and seen most of Ellis Island, and really interesting being there. And again, the tour guide was really helpful, and I learned a lot from him. So then I went back on the ferry and went back to Battery Park and picked up my bike tools from the security guards, and then I got on my bike, and then I headed over towards the Brooklyn Bridge, because this is when my real plan for the day started, and it was already about 3 in the afternoon.